We like to make our leaders into celebrities, whether they're our elected officials, or they could be our titans of industry, or maybe even these days a celebrity pastor. But as often as we put folks like that up on pedestals, we will just as frequently see them fall as they get mired in a variety of scandals, of conspiracies, of drastic and often harmful, painful moral failures. If only we had leaders that we could really look up to. If only there was someone whose example was worth emulating. Fortunately, there is. And we're going to learn more about what makes him so worthwhile in today's True Leader podcast. Welcome to the third episode of the True Leader podcast. My name is Dan Hager. I am here today with not one, but two of my very favorite people. As always, my good friend, mentor, and true leader, Bren White. How are you doing today, Bren?
Good, Dan. Thank you.
But we are also blessed to be joined by one of my very best friends in the world, a man who is a completely devoted follower of Jesus, somebody that is a practicing physician, and somebody that has been through this process of true leadership himself and is actively helping other people become part of that too. Dr. Chastain. How are you, Lewis?
I'm doing wonderful, thank you.
It's great to have this conversation with you guys. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's always good when we're together.
It's a blessing.
So I know, Bren, from your past experience in the corporate world, you've had opportunities to work with some of the names that I've read about in my business school textbooks, people that have been featured in documentaries, have written books, have had their face on the cover of magazines, but even though they're held in such high regard for their business acumen, you wouldn't necessarily consider some of those folks to be true leaders the way we're talking about, would you?
Well, there was one time when I was with three of the most famous CEOs in the world, and I had a meeting at the Harvard Club at their request in New York City and Manhattan, and I was sitting across this table, and it was pretty fancy pants. It was pretty nice, and these three guys were on the other side of the table, and they had been talking about all kinds of different things they had going on. And so we were talking about a specific thing I was trying to help them with in some way. And I listened to them for a while, and then we finally got to have some conversation. But in my sitting there and kind of listening to them on their phones and talking about all kinds of things, I got a sense, a real sense of kind of how they were operating on a daily basis. And the thing that threw me off was they were heading up, really, the best corporations in the world. But, and they had some good ideas, and they were smart, very smart. But as I looked across the table, especially one of the fellows who's the best known, I actually looked into his eyes, and it was almost like he was a shell. I can't explain it completely, but it seemed like he was kind of empty inside. He had a calculator going, he had all these formulas that he was running, he knew how to do metrics on the business and make things happen and whatever. But he couldn't keep track of his own family.
No.
He had multiple marriages, and he was really all over the map. The relational thing seemed to have kind of passed him by, and he was just totally absorbed, in everything it took to run these huge businesses, and it seemed like it had kind of hollowed him out, and that scared me, because I was working with these guys on a big project. It kind of scared me that these are the guys that I am going to be serving and trying to help. And there were some things that seemed to be missing.
Right. Well, and I suspect that there's even just a little bit of fear there that as you work with folks like that, especially that other people are holding up as examples, I could end up like that.
That was my thought at the time. It kind of was one of several wake-up calls, because I'm thinking to myself, nothing is worth losing your marriage and family, not knowing which kid you're talking to and what's going on and what they need. There's nothing worth that.
Yeah. Now, Lewis, I suspect some of that's resonating with you because as a physician, increasingly in the past couple of decades, we've become more and more aware of just how big of an issue professional burnout is.
Yeah, and so that's really important. As Bren was talking, I sort of experienced some thought process about sort of my own journey in that, my own journey in healthcare and burnout with regards to that. And it's interesting because in my profession, we're trained to sort of be authoritative. We're trained to know the answers. We're trained in many ways from sort of a perspective that we have culturally in the world and in our profession to sort of be the source. And so when we see poor leadership, I would speak to my poor leadership first and foremost. And there is very much this culture of abuse where I am the source, I know the answers, and even if I am part of a team of people that's providing care, like you may not be placing value on each individual and realizing that this is a team effort, that's needed to achieve a goal, and sort of interestingly, you think as a physician that you have all the answers and you are just sort of that calculating machine because you're not plugged into the source. And from there you can get into sort of catastrophic places that I have been to in terms of burnout, when I am not aware of the source. And, the way that we accept that behavior in medical culture is the physician who is, having tantrums. And you may have sort of seen this in care that you've received, when there's a physician in the hallway who's cussing and carrying on or throwing charts. Back when we had charts, they don't necessarily throw computers now because there'll be more trouble for that.
Right.
And it's sort of letting the nurses have it either openly or non-openly, and it's a failure to recognize sort of that if there is anything good, if there is healing that's going to take place, like there's a source of light and love and truth, all of that is only possible because of Jesus,
right,
the source.
Well, and so even then, like to segue from that with Jesus, I find that churches and just faith communities broadly aren't exempt from some of these same leadership failures that we see, because we know in folks that work in a professional capacity for ministry, some of those same burnout issues can exist. Some of that same performative culture that, the inability, or in some cases perhaps unwillingness to be vulnerable, to admit faults, to acknowledge faults. Like and even well-publicized cases, like we live in a day and age of celebrity pastors, and we'll often see people get caught up in tremendous, horrific moral failings as a result of this trying to do things based on their own power, their own talent, the perception of people around them. But then I think we'll also see the extreme even in smaller local contexts, where in that church setting, there'll be a lack of direction, there'll be a lack of focus. The local leadership is really, rather than casting vision and nurturing and encouraging people to grow, is in more a place of trying to just keep everybody happy and respond to complaints, and things are much more reactive as opposed to actually having a direction where they're trying to stretch us and grow us and feed us and equip us, and because of that there can be a big disconnect. Well, and that's part of what you've done here, Bren, with the True Leader process that is so powerful, because you are challenging all of us in whatever capacity, whether you are that corporate titan or more of a mid-level manager or the leader of a team, like you'd be in a medical office setting, or a spouse or a parent, a coach, a teacher, a church leader, to not just sort of get caught up with everything that's in the air of who our society says this is a good leader and that is a good leader, but really look behind those eyes, look for that heart, look for that depth. And to find someone worth emulating in any of those circumstances, we're really going to be looking at Jesus, aren't we?
In the end, that's where everybody needs to end up. He is the true one.
So to explore that thought, let's spend just a moment on just a single verse, 1 John chapter 5 and verse 20, and let's talk a little bit about what that says.
Right.
And we know that the Son of God has come, and he has given us understanding so that we can know the true God. And now we live in fellowship with the true God, because we live in fellowship with his Son, Jesus Christ. He is the only true God, and he is eternal life. True one. What does it mean to you to look to Jesus as the true leader?
Well, the first clue for me is that he is the only person to come and to begin speaking to human beings by saying, I tell you the truth. He said it over and over. Every time he said truly, truly, sometimes it actually is translated, I tell you the truth. That sets him apart because most human leaders in history, they may accidentally say some things that are truth and it resonates with people. But every single day Jesus Christ was on earth. He spoke the truth, every word. And he started his ministry. He started it by saying out loud that he lived by every word that came out of the mouth of God, the source of everything. That's who he was listening to. And then he challenges all these human beings about who they're listening to.
Yeah.
Right? And so he's making sure every time he's speaking to a crowd or he's talking to somebody one-on-one, he's making sure that it's registering with them, that he is telling them the truth. Whether it's a Jewish leader like Nicodemus, whether it's the woman at the well, there's a different subgrouping of people, whoever it was, he wanted to make sure that they knew that what he said was true. Now, I'm telling you, every human being I know sometimes says goofy things. Even if they're really smart, even if they're wise, they say goofy things. They say things that are not correct even. And that's a problem, because if you're trying to base what you're doing on somebody else and they're flipping around on you and you can't get a read and kind of lock in, you're going to have some difficulty as a human being and even in trusting.
Yeah.
So Jesus comes saying that I speak the truth. I'm only going to say to you what is true, nothing else. So that's a reassurance, it's a guarantee that nobody else in history has been able to offer. Now, people need to think about this. They need to really think about this.
Well, and that's such a powerful contrast, because when you think about our earlier examples, there are people that my business school professors will hold up as, look at this person. But you sat across the table from some of those people and you see shells of human beings with broken relationships.
Yeah, their brains are working in a certain way, but they're missing some big things.
So that ends up being a huge red flag, that if we emulate that example, we can anticipate similar brokenness.
Right.
So as part of this true leader process, you've got not just a couple, but really 9 key characteristics. So number 1, that key characteristic of Jesus, that key characteristic of this true leader,
Right.
is one who looks to his maker for strength and wisdom.
Right. Now this is what humbling yourself is actually about. People have some weird ideas about what it means to humble yourself. The thing that it means is you and I don't just wake up, shoot out the door, we got it covered, I got everything I need inside of me, and I can handle this. That's not the way you were designed. You were designed to stay plugged in to the source of your life, the source of your breathing, the source of the waves in your brain.
Your purpose.
Your purpose. He thought you up and put you here for a reason. Now, there are a lot of people trying to backpedal on that. Intuitively, most human beings know that they were put here for a reason.
Yeah.
They just got to figure it out. But Jesus shows us exactly how this priority happens. And you start out the day by looking up to the one who has all wisdom.
Yeah.
The one who actually knows how all this was done, where he's going with it. He knows. He's the one. No human being knows that.
Yeah.
No matter how smart they are. They don't. So you go to the source, and Jesus Christ shows us that. But that shows us that he is a humble son. He's trying to trust the Father who put it all into play. That is what the process is about. And it's simple in certain ways, but it's not easy. If you miss this thing of Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, deliberately humbling himself to the Father every day, if you miss that, you miss everything.
That's the source.
You miss it because you're going to be trying to do stuff that even Jesus Christ wasn't trying to do on his own.
Yeah.
He shows us how to be faithful sons. How can a human being trust? Only by trusting the one, the only one who is trustworthy.
The source.
The only one who's true. The source of truth. That's the only way that you and I can operate well dealing with other human beings who are inconsistent and all over the map. Jesus saw that for himself.
And so then as Jesus humbles himself and relies on God, that leads us into the next characteristic where you have he lifts up others while humbling himself.
Right. Now, this is an interesting thing. When you start looking at this, it's a very, very tight connection between his character and his actions. And a lot of times human beings want to pull this apart. They want to pretend to be somebody else, and what's inside of them suffers. They end up being empty shells. The reality is that there's actually a certain courage and conviction that even comes from humbling yourself. Knowing you have to go to the source. You can't just do this on your own. That is a starting place. And so you not only are open to wisdom and learning from him every day, but you do it in such a way, the humbling actually gives you courage to reach out to somebody else. Trusting God, who is trustworthy, gives you footing to reach out to a human being who is not totally trustworthy. Human beings are crazy sometimes. You actually have to have footing somehow, so that as a human being, you're not thrown off. Every single time somebody shoots you down or says something, or there's some kind of a negative reaction. And so that first thing coming from humbling yourself to God allows you to trust enough to lift somebody else up, to reach out to somebody else, to care about somebody else who might actually put it back in your face on you. Yeah. They did it to Jesus.
That makes me think of Jesus in the garden, with his disciples when he's washing feet.
Right.
The one who humbled himself in the form of flesh, who is plugged into the source.
Right.
You made me think about, how leaders will give you their truth. They say they're giving you the truth, but what they're giving you is their truth. He's plugged into the truth. He is the leader but he's giving us an example of servant leadership. Like
Right.
he gets up from the table
Right.
and takes the lowest position in the household that he is in,
Mhm.
washes the feet of the disciples, including people that are not trustworthy, and Judas,
Uh-huh.
who is going to sell him, betray him,
Right.
take him to his death.
Right.
But because he is strong in the truth,
Mhm.
because he is plugged in, looking to the master, looking to the Father, the
Right.
source of wisdom and strength,
Mhm.
he's able to do something that's just unimaginable and would never be part of how we are trained in sort of the secular context. As a physician, the notion of servant leadership, there are some places where that's starting to make an appearance, sometimes divorced from the concept of Jesus Christ.
Right.
But it's really not part of the culture. And you've
Yeah.
spoken to that
Yeah,
before.
you need the character piece. And that's part of what we see in Jesus as well with your next characteristic, that he speaks the truth in love all day long, every day. It's not this divorced isolation toolkit where it's a fad or this is just a key part of how he operates daily, and that is speaking the truth in love continuously.
Yeah, and that's another way that you know that he is the true one, because back to the first passage you were talking about, Ezekiel, he is the one who comes and actually shepherds us. Jesus, it's God in the flesh. He is the one who empties himself out. Talk about humbling yourself.
Yeah.
He empties himself out to come and be in the middle of us.
Yeah.
To walk us through it. And this is a Psalm 23 life that Jesus Christ is bringing. He's the good shepherd. And he is showing us how to have Psalm 23 life. And when you talk about the father-son thing, it's set up this way because every human being on the face of the earth needs a father that they can rely on. Okay? Now, everybody's dad has been a little bit different. Some people didn't have a dad, really. That is part of the issue relationally. But God is the Father.
Mhm.
And Jesus Christ empties himself out to show us how this works. And he is helping us to get into this relationship with God as our Father. And we learn all about it by following his example. And the character is formed by God, by his Spirit. He's the one who ends up doing it, but we're paying attention because Jesus Christ is leading the way.
And his ability to do that, to empty himself out in that way and not end up the hollow shell of the corporate executive, to
Right.
not end up the burnt out team leader, ties into the next characteristic, which is that he has anchored his whole being in God's truth,
Yeah.
love, and loves God above all else. That the reason he doesn't run empty, the reason that he's not explosive and harmful like we so often encounter, is because of that anchor.
Yeah, well, okay, so Jesus, one of his first teachings had to do with you can't serve both God and the world, or the earthly. You have to choose who you're going to serve, who you're going to be, what you're going to be connected to the most. You have to actually choose. And he's right. He is right. You have to choose. And a lot of psychological problems, emotional problems come to human beings because they aren't properly anchored. And they're not properly focused, even as personalities, as people. Their thought process is fragmented. And that causes all kinds of breakdown, even in terms of general health. It causes a breakdown in the design of God. The design of God is you and I were made by him to walk with him. To walk with him. And he's supposed to take care of us. And he will bring to us all the good things that we need as we are staying close to him. If you don't do that, you have just deprived yourself of the most fundamental relationship that is required by God's design for human beings.
Yeah.
You don't have an anchor. You don't have an anchor. If you don't really know God through Jesus Christ, you don't really have an anchor.
Well, and to see in that too, that Jesus recognizes that brokenness that we have a part of him. Like when we don't have him, that is the consequence. So then one of the other characteristics that he shows us is as he is anchored, from that he prays, protects, develops, and comforts.
Yeah.
So even though we have all of this brokenness, he, in his presence with us, offers us what we need to help mend what we've broken because we're not the way that God designed for us to be.
Absolutely. And actually, that's why the truth and the love are a part of this healing. Because it's what human beings need. They need to know what is actually real, what is actually true. There's a bunch of fake stuff in the world. There are a bunch of lies in the world. Human beings need help. And you don't just go to anybody. You go to the one who put you here.
Fluid truth hurts us.
Yeah, right. It does hurt. It's undermining. But this thing, I find this interesting. I put this together in a way because what flows out of these first other things we talked about? What flows out? Very, very positive things. When you are humbling yourself before God, you're seeking wisdom from him. You're actually seeking the will of God. This is what Jesus was talking about when he first got here. He was talking about, the will of God being done on earth as it is in heaven. And he's teaching his followers to pray that way because it means something's going to change inside of you. And your relationship with God is going to change. So he is praying his way into every single day.
And as our relationship with God changes, it affects the way we relate to each other. So
Right.
again,
Right.
unlike our titans of industry that might use up the people that work for them or have broken relationships with those who should be closest to them, if we have that relationship with God, it orients us towards praying, protecting, developing, comforting. It orients us towards your next characteristic of knowing that true greatness is in serving the seeking, weak, hurting, and hopeless, which is a completely different orientation than when we're just focused on what am I trying to accomplish, what are my goals, what's in it for me. This is completely shifting the paradigm.
Right. If you are not focused upward and you're trying to dominate horizontally, you're going to fail. You're going to fail. I don't care who you are. You may make much money, but in the end, you're going to fail.
Just imagine sort of the people that are wanting to learn about leadership and true leader, or the people who are just in a place of hurt in terms of leadership. If their leaders are praying, protecting, developing, comforting those who are weak and hurting and helpless, like whatever leader I'm hurt with, what would it look like if it looks like what Jesus is training us into?
Yeah, if you walk into a church as somebody that is struggling, and this is what the preacher at that church, this is what the elders of that church, this is what the deacons in that church are operating by.
Right.
You are a doctor that walks into that building feeling like it's a mistake to even be there because you've got so many demands on your time. But you've got people that are receiving you with that kind of love. They're pouring into you, developing you. They're not just seeing what they can get out of you, but they're seeing your weakness, they're seeing your hurt and meeting you there and caring for you.
Yeah.
And then your next characteristic, building relationships intentionally each day. So not just as a one-off, but through genuine caring, honesty, openness, and thoughtfulness.
Right.
Even navigating difficult things,
Yes.
difficult conversations, painful things. The way those things are sort of addressed and handled will be completely different than what we want to do
Absolutely.
as usual course.
And it boils down to some very practical things. We're talking about character and the actions that go with it. But there's several, all these are obviously integrated, they're linked, but what you see is what God is bringing to us in Jesus Christ is the opposite of tyranny
Mm.
and slavery.
Mm.
He is bringing to us a certain comforting, a certain truthfulness, frankness that every human being needs, an enveloping love, and even a protecting from the standpoint of wanting the best for other human beings. So much so that you're willing to not only try to lift them up, encourage them, but to serve them in some way. It changes everything. It changes everything, including the very character of human beings.
I'm reminded of the passage when Jesus looks out at the crowd, and it says that he saw them as harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd.
Right.
And so
Totally.
his charge as the
Totally.
leader to those that were following him is that they were to pray for laborers.
Uh-huh.
That God would send out people to be among them to meet that need, to bring the healing that they needed.
Right. And when you or anybody else is praying for specific other human beings, you will treat them differently.
Mhm.
When you are prayerful about the well-being of some other human beings, you will treat them differently. Whether you're leading them or not, you are going to treat them differently. And it is going to show the love of God. It's going to demonstrate what Jesus was demonstrating.
Which is what we see in your final two characteristics. Because you end these 9 characteristics with listens and takes decisive action
Oh,
that fits with God's word
right.
and that teaches Christ's way by what he does and says all day long. Because that's really the key. It's one thing to know Jesus
Right.
operated this way.
Right.
Our challenge, and what you are helping thousands of leaders all over the world do through this true leader process, is to observe these characteristics in Jesus, but then act on them and make it part of our operating system as we live.
Our daily pattern.
Not say the message, but do the message.
Yeah, but this is the missing piece. You know, it's you can talk about things all day long and forever, but the missing piece is, how do I get from some of these thoughts to these actions, which turn into a very, I would say, dominant daily pattern that really demonstrates the power and the love of God, the truth of God in me as a human being, real time. Real time. That's what he wants. He wants human beings to be so plugged into him, so fully, wholeheartedly seeking him and loving him that he is able to bless them, to fill them up to overflowing in their spirit in a way that you're not going to get otherwise. It doesn't matter what else, other things you want to try to pursue. This is the source of your life. This is the one who put all of the good potential in you. This is the one. And he's showing you how to do it.
And that's where we're going to head next.
Okay.
So in our next episode, for each of these characteristics, you've identified a daily action that we can practice doing.
Right.
So for anyone that will like, follow, subscribe, please help share what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
When our next episode airs, we'll give you 9 very specific things that were part of Jesus's daily pattern that we can make part of our daily pattern to completely shift things for us, for those that we're leading, just for lives all around.
Right. Very powerful, and you will be blessed in a way that is really hard to imagine.